Archangels, ghosts, and Bigfoot. Oh my. It's just another night for Supernatural Girls. Real stories, real answers to life's biggest supernatural mysteries. And now for another exciting interview with paranormal experts from this world and others. Here's your host, paranormal researcher Patricia Baker, on the one, the only Supernatural Girls.
Welcome, everyone, to another exciting episode of Supernatural Girls. I am your host, Patricia Baker. I'm here with my lovely co-host all the way from Tucson, Miss PK. How are you?
Absolutely fabulous. It's hot here, which is nice. And it's just been a very nice day. My plants that started to look great out front are withering up because the sun is so hot.
Oh.
So I have to water them twice a day now.
Yeah, that's desert living for you.
Oh, it definitely is. I figured if they're shrinking up, I will be too.
Oh no. Don't shrink up.
Oh,
We need you.
It's a better way to beats a diet.
It does. It does. But, you know, one thing I was thinking about, I want to hear from everybody in our audience. I'm thinking of bringing on some of the podcasters from the Karen Reed trial. We usually don't go down the crime road, but these podcasters are amazing. I mean, they have got this trial figured out, everything that's going on. They are better than any newscasters ever that I've ever watched in the entire world. So I'm thinking of bringing a few of them on. If you guys are interested in hearing about that case from some very entertaining people who really know this inside and out. So shoot us an email, let us know, okay? And in the meantime, what's going on with the numbers, PK?
Well, June is a great month for family. It's all about family issues, wanting to get together, putting all these different things into play. And it's also excellent for alternative medicine and taking a look at what we can do to help heal ourselves, make things a little bit better. And if you can spend some time by and or around water, you'll find it'll be the most rejuvenating way to start or end your day, either way. But it's take a good look at what you can do with and for the family. Don't be bossy, don't be pushy, just kind of open up a little bit. See what others are being geared towards or what they're looking for. And you'd be surprised, you'll find that you're on the same page they are. You just may be coming from a different direction. So this way you get a chance to rev up the interests that they have and learn a little bit more on your side. So all that's a plus. Anytime the family can get together and do things calmly, shall we say, delightful to put the families together, get a cookout, get things going, do a little bit more entertaining within the family. It doesn't have to be high dollar things. It could be just sandwiches and potato chips, but do something where you can spend time with the family, for the family, and because of the family. It'll go much nicer.
That sounds good to me. Picnic. I'm all for it. As soon as the rain stops here, we'll be able to get back out. Jeez,
I forgot you get water at your house. I get sunshine.
Way too much. You know, every single weekend, they were saying since December has been a wet weekend in Massachusetts. Yeah. Every single one. That's crazy, isn't it?
It is. It is crazy. Good grief.
Insane. I know. And I wanted to mention that next week, we have a wonderful guest on the show who's going to talk to us about the Carl Higdon UFO abduction. New book. It's dropping next week. We will be the first to have her on to talk about that story. So it's an incredible story and just nothing else like it in the abduction world. So be sure to join us. But tonight we have a dynamic duo, to say the least, right? A husband and wife team, fabulous. Andy Tomlinson and his beautiful wife, Reena Kumarasingham. I hope I said that right. Anyways, Andy is a psychotherapist and a founder of the Past Life Regression Academy and a founding member of the Spiritual Regression Therapy Association and the Earth Association of Regression Therapy. Quite an expert at this. And Reena has been a regression therapist, between lives therapist, and trainer and supervisor for the Past Life Regression Academy since 2014, where she has spearheaded and pioneered the new consciousness retreats. So we've got two fabulous experts and a beautiful new book, Between Lives. So guys, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's so lovely to be here.
Oh, it's our pleasure.
Welcome. Thank you.
It really is our pleasure. So tell us, our audience loves personal growth, new things about their own lives, consciousness, what they can do to make their lives better. And you've covered a lot of material in this book. So what was it that made you want to write Between Lives?
I think so. The impetus, the catalyst for all this was when I had my own near-death experience in 2020 because of COVID. And when I had my own near-death experience, I realized within that near-death experience that when my consciousness left the body, it totally expanded, and it went to a place of just of freedom and peace. And I let go of quite a lot of my things that weren't necessary, that I thought was necessary when I was in the body, but they just weren't necessary when I was in that space, in that near-death experience space. And also when I was going through my near-death experience, it took me about 3 months to actually process, when I came back, to actually process that I had actually experienced a near-death experience. And it had such a huge impact on me, and it totally changed my life. And I sat here and I wondered two things. The first thing was, a lot of my personal near-death experience, the process was very similar to something that we facilitate, which is called Between Lives Regression, or Between Lives Spiritual Regression. And this process was founded by a gentleman called Dr. Michael Newton. And I actually said to Andy, I wondered if this was unique to me, that my near-death experience and my between life process was similar, or is this something that people generally experienced? And so that's when we started to do the research, where we compared 500 between life case studies, as well as nearly about 400 cases of near-death experiences. And we realized that actually the process is very, very similar. And then that led us to believe that actually this gives evidence that consciousness does survive the body. And then I thought to myself, well, if consciousness can survive the body and expands outside the body, can the consciousness not expand within the body while we're here? Do we need something as traumatic as a near-death experience to evolve our consciousness? And that's when we thought, no, we don't need something as traumatic as the near-death experience. And so then we went into part 2 of the book, where we gave quite a lot of tips and techniques of how to evolve the consciousness. And that's basically how the book came about.
So it's wonderful because it's full of great information and also a way to use it, a way to integrate this into somebody's life. So if they're interested in expanding their consciousness and going further with this, and you've got some great tips for them in this book.
Definitely.
Wonderful. Now, with your near-death experience, when you left your body, did you actually die, like on the table? Was there anything said to you that your heart stopped or everything went flatlined, or how did you experience this?
So I had COVID when it was quite new. It was in March of 2020, at the end of March of 2020. And at that point in time, nobody quite knew how to treat it. So if you actually looked at the newspapers in those days, because I was looking at the papers when I was having COVID, people would go to the hospital, they'd be intubated, they'd be isolated, and many people were reportedly, they were reported to die. And so when I actually got it and my lungs couldn't expand, it just felt like there were two metal bands around my chest. And I couldn't breathe. I said to Andy, is it okay if, no matter what happens, if I stay at home? Because I just didn't want to be in that position where I was intubated and isolated and away from loved ones. And Andy was very sweet because he said, yes, it's fine if I stayed at home, because that meant he was the primary caregiver. And there were a couple of times when I couldn't breathe that I thought I was going to die. And then that's when I panicked. But I didn't, because, the breathing kind of came back. It was regular. But there was one night when Andy took the girls, we've got 2 Maltese Terriers, and he went off to the separate room he was sleeping in. And as I turned off the light, and as my eyes were closing, I had a knowing that if I closed my eyes now, I would never open them again.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. But that thought came with a lot of peace. It was as though something else had taken over the body, and that knowing gave me a lot of peace, except for the one curious part that just popped up, that was just observing.
Oh my.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, it's startling when that happens, right?
Very definitely.
It
But
was
you felt good.
Yeah, it was a shock because neither Andy nor I expected that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. But you got that expansive feeling, and I think, isn't that what people are trying to get to without dying? So it's like,
Yeah.
that's what we wanna feel, is that expansiveness rather than the restriction of the body, its aches and pains and limitations. So you carry that with you now.
I do carry that with me because that expansiveness came back with me. So even when I was back in the body, I mean, about 3 months after I came back into the body, like, I was still in shock, the ego consciousness had kicked in, and, I was still processing and processing. But that expansiveness still stays with me. I mean, it was really interesting because there was this one time, it was just after my near-death experience, and I was sort of at the balcony, just looking outside, looking at our neighbors, and I saw my neighbor cutting grass in his garden, and I turned to Andy, who had come to see how I was doing, and I said, "Oh, our neighbor is having legal problems."
Mm.
And to me, it was the grass was green, the sky was blue, and he had legal problems. And sure enough, about a week later, when Andy went out and bumped into the neighbor shared that he had legal problems with Andy.
Oh
So
my.
it was almost like the subtle body, my consciousness, was so expansive that it was just picking out all these different vibrations that people were giving out. My neighbors were giving out. But then I've managed to sort of contain that slightly because I didn't want to sense people's, what they were going through. I felt it was a bit intrusive.
Mhm.
Yeah. So that sort of stopped. But I think the other thing that really hit me was that our greatest currencies are our time and our energy, and how we spend our time and energy, what we think is important isn't as important as what we feel it is, because there's something so much bigger and more expansive out there.
That's wonderful that you came away with all of this great experience and newfound knowledge, and
Mm.
it's inspiring, in your book, and I'm sure when you meet people in person, they sense it from you. So,
Yeah.
Andy, have you ever had a near-death experience?
No, I've had between life experience,
Okay.
and I mean that was an area. I mean, my background really is working with past lives, and then I work very closely with some of the pioneers with between life regression, and I've been teaching and working with people for about 20 years with that. So my experience has been with the between life regression. So I could understand a lot of things that Reena was saying, but it prompted me to dive in and do a little bit of research about near-death experience. And that's when I came across the wonderful work of some medical pioneers, people like Pim van Lommel, Bruce Grayson, and Peter Fenwick. All of them have written peer-reviewed articles and have done quite extensive questionnaires on people who've had near-death experience to find the similarities between the experiences. And I think within the medical community, although there have been initially skeptics, they've pretty much established that consciousness survives death for
Right.
a small period of time until obviously the person came back into the body. So all of their work was based on people's experiences. And then after that, they had ideas of what may happen. But we know from between life regression, from people's accounts, exactly what does happen, which are as reliable because people are in very deep trance as the near-death experiences. And this is when we compared the two accounts with quite a large sample. We had about 500 between life regression accounts and 400 near-death experience accounts. We have quite extensive questionnaires that we used to measure what was happening in each of the stages. So we were able to compare it quite accurately. And the experiences were very, very similar. There was obviously a small difference in that with between life regression, it's all guided by a therapist. So a therapist will say, what happens next? And tell me more about that, or describe that in more detail. Whereas in the near-death experience, it's not something that's planned. It happens unexpectedly, and it's real time because people don't know if they're going to come back or not. So there is a difference. It's almost like the difference between watching a movie about romance and actually being in a romantic situation yourself. I mean, they still enable people to have that experience, but from a different perspective.
Now, a lot of people have reported when they have a past life regression or a between life regression that there's healing that actually takes place that affects their life now, which is wonderful. And we want to hear some stories from both of you about that. However, there is a new, fairly new train of thought about this, that reincarnation is a trap. And I'm sure you've heard people talk about this, that it's just recycling souls, getting us to come back here when there's another choice. But maybe many people don't know about that choice. They don't know how to get to that choice. So they automatically come back to life in another body with another history, with whatever. So it's a very interesting thing that is taking place right now in that discussion. So what do you think about that?
Well, I can tell you from with my near-death experience, and just to draw a similarity, when I was actually given a choice whether I wanted to come back or not. And I chose to come back because I had one piece of unfinished business. And that one piece of unfinished business was I wanted to leave a note for Andy to tell
Oh,
him I'd loved him and that this wasn't his fault. Because I just couldn't bear, even in that space, I couldn't bear the thought of Andy coming down and seeing my lifeless body,
mm,
you know,
yes.
when it would, you know, it would have shocked him. And also he had done everything to, you know, to the best of his capacity to care for me. And I just wanted to leave him this note. So when when I had this piece, this little bit of negotiation, the beings basically said, no, you either go back or you come with us. And I said, you know what, I think I'm going to go back. And they said, okay, enjoy the emotions on this, on, you know, where you are. Because, you know, I don't know why they said that. So I'm just guessing that perhaps we don't get to feel as many emotions as we do on planet Earth, or the intensity of emotions as we do in this part of the world. And also, you know, if we look at, because I grew up a Hindu as well, and for me, past lives was just a way of life, as it were, and the whole thinking there is that past lives, we reincarnate because we have to work out our karma or our unfinished business, right? In the Hindu sense, it's the sins, but that doesn't sit very well with me because I think it's just the amount of unfinished business that we have, and also that we still have a lot of attachments. So over here, my attachment was, you know, obviously Andy. But I think even when people reincarnate over and over again, they come back because there's either an attachment to lessons, or an attachment to various souls that they want to experience, and you know, sort of moving forward again in lives in different capacities, if that makes any sense.
It
And
does. Yes.
When
Yeah.
you were in that state, did you feel that the need to come, that you were kind of at a crossroad between going forward or going backwards?
Yes.
Because that was one of the things that I was the most fearful of. And I could see lights, and I could hear voices, but there was supposedly nobody there.
Right.
And what do you attribute the voices that come to us at that point in time?
For me, there weren't any, you know, auditory voices, but I could sense voices around me. And
Exactly.
Yeah, they were the beings that came to take me away, you know.
Were you inundated with a lot of light? Almost like floodlights, the lights going off and then kind of coming back and forth?
I wasn't. There were just 5 beings at the foot of my bed, and they were light beings. They didn't have any human or you know, they were just like, do you know Bunsen burners, the flame of a Bunsen burner?
Yes. That's exactly what I'm trying to express. It's that kind of a light. It's not a person, but it's a light.
Yes, exactly. Yes. So I had 5 of them at the foot of my bed. And then they sort of worked on my, what I would call my current life wounding, most of which happened when I was a child, you know, my childhood wounding. And then, you know, I was just pulled forward like I was in an ocean, riptide. There was no control, no nothing.
Oh my.
But that choice of coming back was actually really difficult, because that space of freedom and absolute peace is something I had never experienced before, and it was so tempting to go down
Not to give up.
that road. Yeah, because, you know, it was so beautiful. But I just knew that this unfinished business. Yes.
Things to yeah. It's like leaving the house untidy. I got to get back and fix it up.
You can't live like this. Yeah.
Yeah, just to come back to your question about do we have to come back or not? And one of the things that we found in all of these between life work, and now there's been over 10,000 people have had this experience, is free will at a soul level or the human level is the most important thing, because this is how we grow and develop. But just to illustrate it, there was a client who approached me. She lived in Canada and she wanted a between life regression session and was coming over to the UK. So she came over and I gave her a session. And her husband had died 6 months previously, and she was having a lot of trouble to cope. And we went into the between life regression. She started off, because how we do between life regression, you start off with a past life, go through the death, and then people talk about the experiences that they have while they're in deep hypnosis. And the past life she had was, as a woman, her husband had gone off to war, he'd been killed, and she'd been given up on life. And she died 3 months or so afterwards. And when people give up on life, it's like a form of suicide.
Mm-hmm.
And when she crossed over, she was met by a spirit guide. And the spirit guide kind of had their arms crossed a little bit and said, "This is the third time it's happened, isn't it?" And this is about as tough as it is, because people do their own reviews, and she reviewed the life, and the spirit guide was saying, look, there were people that came into your life that enable you to get on and move in a different direction. It was your choice. And the person realized that and then was met by a husband from the past life, and they went off to do planning. And again, this is where an aspect of free will is involved. They wanted to plan what to do for the next life. And they knew she wanted to work through this aspect to be able to cope with losing a loved one. So they talked about various options. And then finally they decided to have a life where she would be a woman again, but they would be quite independent, so that when this event happens, she would have a better inner strength to do that. And it was also suggested by the beings that were reviewing this that some sort of spiritual help would be important. And then, of course, the spiritual help that was important was to have this between life regression. And when she came out of that, she understood what had caused it. She was able to get on with her life in a meaningful way and work through the life lesson.
That's wonderful.
And this just demonstrates just how powerful these spiritual experiences are, that as a therapist, I just simply say, what happens next? Tell me more about it, describe it in more detail. And the whole story emerges from the person themselves. And so that they find their own answers through their own free will of how to work through very difficult situations.
That's wonderful. So people can have something palpable to work through, and improve the quality of their lives after they work with either one of you. It's just a wonderful healing. And we've also heard about people having past life regressions or between life regressions and healing something physically, whether it was migraine headaches or some other type of pain. Have you had?
I can give you an example of that with a very, very dramatic one. There was a student on one of the workshops I was doing, and she wanted to learn how to do regression therapy and working with past lives, but she had a problem with her hands, and she found that she had an awful lot of pain in her hands and found it quite hard to pick up objects. So on the very first workshop where she came to, I did some work with her, and she went into a past life where she was in an orphanage and there'd been a fire, and she was in charge of looking after the children, and she tried to rescue 2 of them, and in the process had burnt her hands and then died. And the loss of 2 children and the burning of the hands was the unfinished business that she brought back into this life. And it turned out that in her current life, she had 2 children. She had an abusive husband who was trying to take the children from her, and this old wound had come flaring up. and we're able to work through the trauma of it. And sometimes we use body therapy, where in this case, she was able to grab hold of the children with her arms. And it's a way where you can just physically recreate things a bit deeper than just doing it through your intent. And tears were pouring down her cheeks as she realized she had the strength to be able to help the children. And that inspired her to be able to rescue the children from this difficult life situation and work through the personal issue.
And did that result with her hands being cured of pain?
Yes, and the pain went away from her hands. I mean, and because the way it works at a soul level is if you've worked through the lesson, there's no need to have it. I mean, emotions and physical pain are there just to remind us as humans that there's something we have to work through. And as soon as we've worked through it, from a soul perspective, it's done, it's finished. The lesson is complete. And it's not a case of symptoms reducing. Symptoms just go away immediately. And it's extremely profound, extremely quick. And
there's no amount of medication
as well.
So it has to come from this other dimension, the information, and with you both guiding people through it so that they can find their way through it. I mean, there's no amount of medication that's going to make a difference with something like that. It will to a point. But unless you get to the root cause, and in this case, it was as you described, then you're at a loss. So, I mean, PK and I have both talked about our own health issues ad nauseum, and it's so exciting to hear that there is this path that you can take to explore the unknown about yourself and possibly come back with a cure.
Yeah, but the really exciting thing is that not everybody is in a position where they can come to therapists and work through issues. A lot of people want to be able to start to do the work themselves. So we put a lot of information in the book that we have about how people can work with different aspects of expanding the consciousness.
That's wonderful.
And it's like starts off step by step with a series, and people have to work hard. It's not like an instant thing. You do an exercise and all your problems go away, but it's a way where people can, in their own good time, start working through and make progress. And as their consciousness expands, it'll start to transform them in a really positive, helpful way, and move them towards this exciting new consciousness that we're all moving to.
Yes, it is very exciting. Can you give us one of your tips for that?
I think for me, the biggest tip is detachment. Because like I said, we are so attached to so many different things that we think are important, but really it isn't. They aren't as important. I remember when I came back after my near-death experience, I wasn't so bothered about, because at that time I had released my second book, and I wasn't so bothered about how many people would read the book. It was more the impact the book would have, even if it's a small number of readers. Does that make sense? And I was spending a lot of time with people that I wanted to spend time with, like my family and my dogs and really, really close friends. And I also realized that I had quite a lot of people within my circle that couldn't honor me or value me in the way that I wanted to be honored or valued. And so I actually reduced my circle of friends around me to just a very few small number of very quality people that I could spend like quality time with. I didn't feel like I was pulled in 1,000 different places and 1,000 different pieces by people that I felt sort of valuing me for who I was, like they were trying to use me for their own agenda or their own. Yeah. So, and the thing is, letting people go or letting a circumstance go takes a lot of courage, I suppose. But for me, it didn't feel courageous. It just felt like this was the right thing to do. And I had to honor where my time and my energy was going, because it felt like I am on borrowed time and borrowed energy.
Interesting. Yes. I mean, we're reminded about Anita Moorjani's work. Dying to Be Me was her first book. And I think it's so true for so many people. We give ourselves away. I think possibly more women do this than men, but it's a very painful process. And then we have to reclaim everything.
Yeah.
And do what you're talking about, which is, walking through the fire going, no more of this from my so-called friends or family or whatever, which is hard to do.
It is.
But
And
you
also, I was just going to say that when I made this journey, this trip, nobody knew. I mean, as I was pulled by the riptide, obviously I was going and I was in a bit of shock. But one of the thoughts that hit me was nobody knew that I was going. It was this huge thing that was happening to me, and I couldn't even tell my friends or Andy that this was happening. And then when I came back, when I chose to come back, one of my reflecting points from that was, well, why did I care so much about other people's opinions of me? Because, if nobody knew when I was going to transcend, very few people's lives would actually be impacted, whether I stayed or whether I went. Obviously there'll be a small group of people close to me. They would be impacted for a little while, and then obviously they'd move on with their lives. And I was thinking to myself, why do I care about people's opinions about me?
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
That's a good point. We don't think about that aspect of things.
Right. It is an
But
important.
we look at that moment in time that we're involved in.
Yes.
And did you feel a fear when this took place with you?
Not one bit.
Or just some people I've spoken with have had that fear factor of like they didn't know whether to reach out or go forward or to stay where they were and go backwards.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I totally understand. I didn't feel any fear because the temptation to go forward was that great that I actually wanted to go forward. But, I just couldn't bear the thought of going forward without at least leaving a note for Andy.
Well,
That's amazing.
The fear factor, and that maybe is the wrong word I should have used or should not have used. It's like being on a teeter-totter. You're in the middle. If you step this way, you start to drop down. You step this way, it's bringing you back, but you're not certain about what's coming at you. Because did you have a brightness of light around you, almost like something coming down on you that was
No, that one
opening up in any respect? Or did you just calmly just allow things to be?
I was very calm when I allowed things to be. And I felt like I was in a very dark space with twinkling lights around me that was expansive and went on, for eternity. But my choice was very intentional. And so I didn't ever feel I was on a teeter-totter where something could happen to me. I felt like everything was, apart from being pulled, by the riptide, which was...
Well, yeah, I'm calling it a teeter-totter. You're calling it a riptide.
A riptide, yes.
It's that balance back and forth.
Yeah, but apart from being pulled forward, I felt like everything that was happening, the choices I was making was very, very were intentional, and I wasn't being forced into anything.
No.
It was me.
Yeah.
Could I offer a top tip from me?
Yes, please.
It's about absorbing energy from others. I'll give you an example. When I was in corporate, I was invited to join what they call their caving club. And the person who invited me went described that to do the caving club, you had to go through the cave, and then right at the end was something called a sump, which is the cave actually went in like a U shape. It was all submerged, so you had to totally submerge yourself in water, go and dive through a hole and pop up at the other end. And he went through describing this in great detail, and I thought, oh, well, I quite fancied the caving part, but I got quite fearful about this sump in the way he kept describing it. So anyway, I went through and got to the point where the sump was and thought, oh my goodness, I'm getting here to the big thing. And it turned out that there was a rope underneath where you could pull yourself, and I just popped through the other end and thought, oh, it wasn't quite as bad as I thought. And then as I was waiting there, I said, well, where's Ravi, who's the one that was telling me about it, about the sump? He said, oh, he never comes through. He's too frightened. And what had been happening, I'd been picking up all of his fear and absorbing it. And it's so easy to do that. And when we look at the media, it's full of fear. When we watch the news, it's full of fear. It's surrounding us. We can have an event happening on the other side of the world, and all of a sudden, it's as if it's right on our own doorstep.
True.
So the tip is to cut out as much of that low vibrational energy as possible. For example, going into the woods or in nature, the energy is just totally different. You can feel uplifted. It feels positive. You come through there and it's almost like it's a complete opposite from having time listening to the videos of the news and events like that. So the top tip is to cut out as much as you can, or even do like an information detox for a period if necessary, because you'll still find out key events that are happening in the world without necessarily watching them all, and just spend more time in nature or in the garden or doing mindfulness exercises like artwork or knitting or anything that just involves being in the present and not connected with all of the low vibrational fear energy that permeates through the media.
It's a good idea. I mean, it's a really good tip. And what we have to remember about the traditional media is it's all about brainwashing, and it's all about an agenda. So it really does take us off our path. And there's still, I'm sure, a lot to come out about during COVID, how we were being brainwashed.
Yeah,
definitely.
Think a certain way about the shot and the disease and where it came from. It was insane. So there were certain people that escaped the brainwashing and were aware of it, but there are a lot of people who were just brainwashed. So there's a lot of danger in paying too much attention to that noise, and they want us to think a certain way, believe a certain way. And again, what about us? It's like, how do I feel about this? How do I feel about me? And the people who are questioning it got a lot of blowback. They were left out of family events. It was crazy. Crazy.
Yes.
But I think there's still a lot to come out as to what techniques they were using to brainwash people. Some of us escaped it for whatever reason. Maybe we're not as impressionable, but PK and I often heard from people about all of this and what side are you on? And, it's all fear mongering, but it's even worse than that.
Exactly. There's something we'd written in our book, and we referred to another book by Richard Dawkins, and he wrote an amazing book called Power versus Force. And he actually did some research, and he measured the vibration of individual emotions. So, it's a really interesting book if anybody wants to read that. And he actually measured that shame had the lowest vibration, and then guilt was the second lowest, and then I think fear was the fourth lowest vibration. And so one of the things we've put in our book referring to his work is to just listen to, instead of the words, listen to the emotion that they're trying to cultivate using those words. So like
Mhm.
with COVID, they were trying to cultivate fear emotion,
And they did.
lower vibration emotion,
Mhm.
And so listen to words that are a bit more empowering, for example, words that some of the higher vibration narratives. And that's the thing that will kick you out of this lower vibration, dense 3D space and start moving us into the higher vibration 5D space.
That's also very helpful. Yes.
Yes,
I
definitely.
want to mention this, if I may. This is because we're talking about how we can be affected by our own choices and past lives, that where we carry certain fears with us or certain experiences that don't find a resolution because we don't know about them until we meet you guys and you take us back in time, and then we can find it. But here's another thing where we are influenced and don't know it. I worked with a doctor a long time ago who came up with a way of healing people that was quite unique. And one of her patients who came to her had migraines all the time. And no matter what she did, the migraines were tormenting her. So Dr. Mary worked on her and said, okay, who was it in your lineage that was shot in the head?
Oh,
And as it turned out, her great, 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 however many greats, grandfather was Abraham Lincoln.
Oh,
oh,
wow.
for heaven's sakes.
Yes. And after Dr. Mary worked with this woman and this information came out, she was free of those migraines forevermore. So there's that kind of influence that apparently, I don't know how it does it, but it comes through maybe genetically or some other energy connection. And then we're at the receivership of this, not even knowing that this is what's happening.
Mm. Well, we certainly know that a lot of things go through the generations. I mean, for example, quite a few people who are guilty of being, say, paedophiles or have committed torture, were actually tortured themselves when they were young,
Yes.
and the parents were equally abused, and it tends to go down the generations, and it takes someone that has to stop and say, no, I'm not going to do that. And you
Mhm.
break the generation chain. We certainly do a lot of that in the work we have. I mean, I'm not familiar with the particular way that the person you talked about works.
It was very different than regressive therapy.
Mhm.
It
Yeah.
did bring out that very important information. And again, if that woman hadn't come to that moment of understanding, she would have continued to suffer. And there's certainly plenty of suffering these days. So
Yeah.
it's nice to know that you both offer not only the tips in your books, but also that you still offer private sessions, I would
Which
imagine.
is wonderful.
Yes,
Yeah.
I offer between life sessions, but we do have, as part of the Spiritual Regression Therapy Association, we have a directory of past life regression therapists that Andy's trained from all over the world. So if anybody goes, is looking for some, a qualified past life regression therapist, they can go into that Spiritual Regression Therapy Association and into the directory
Fabulous.
and find a therapist. But
Very
I
good.
also, if that's okay, if I wanted to add that I had an experience like this, following the ancestral line. So basically, what happens is you've got your regression line, with your past lives going this way. And if this is your present, you've got your ancestral line sort of coming down that way, if that makes sense. Then the cross point is where you're at. And I had a client who came to me because she had very heavy menses bleeding every month. It was so heavy she had to go and see her gynecologist to get it medically controlled, as it were. But no matter what they did, they couldn't control it. And when I worked with her, we went back up her ancestral line, because the way we work is to go back to the source of this problem. And it doesn't matter where in the timeline they get to. So she actually ended up going up her ancestral line. And then there was a great, I don't know, 7 times great grandmother who was so badly raped that when she came out of that experience, she wanted to curse her entire line of females, so that they would never experience that form and that level of abuse and assault that she had. And so, it took sort of helping her 7-time great grandmother to heal from that trauma, for that great grandmother to then release everybody from her, from the curse that she had sent down the line. And once we had done that, my client, because I followed up with her about a month or 6 weeks later, and 8 weeks later, and her bleeding was fine.
Oh my
Managed to control the bleeding.
Wonderful.
Extraordinary. And this is what people need to understand, that this type of therapy that you offer is very powerful, very effective.
Yeah.
And now I have to ask, because we do have people listen all over the world, do you do these sessions on Zoom ever, or another form of, you do? Okay.
I do the live sessions on Zoom now. Yes.
Oh,
What
great.
is the website so people can get in touch with you?
My website is my full name, reenakumarasingham.com. That's my personal website. And then we have got a joint website about the book and moving into the new consciousness, and that's www.pioneeringnewconsciousness.com.
Perfect.
Yeah. And I have a website, Andy/Tomlinson.com. Sorry, Andy-Tomlinson.com.
Wonderful.
Just to add that a lot of our work in helping people these days is really working at an energy vibrational level, because a lot of illnesses and disease is because parts of the body have got the wrong vibrational energy, and that makes it easier for illness and disease comes in. So we find the appropriate vibrational energy that's needed to work with that work. I mean, just for example, a couple of the students who were working with the techniques we were teaching, one of them had a prostate problem. Whenever he went to the toilet, he was in incredible pain, and worked on the energetic level around the prostate gland. And the other person went to the toilet 10 minutes later, pain-free. So
Incredible.
So energy work sometimes is the appropriate way of working, and it can be very, very quick. Or sometimes people have energies of various sorts on them that have come from outside, and that can be cleared, like spirit attachments or curses or things of that nature. And again, those things can be worked with energetically very quickly and cleared. So we do a lot of work like that, because a lot of people who are on the spiritual path are raising the vibrations, and there's something that they can't quite clear. They need a little bit of help. So we're able to go in, just do that little bit of help, and then they continue and draw in on their own resources to continue their soul journey.
Well, I'm sorry to tell you both, we are out of time.
Oh, went too fast. Much too fast.
Down. I know, really. You're both so wonderful, and we so
Definitely.
appreciate the healing that you're offering to the world right now. And so everybody, get this book, Between Lives.
Definitely.
You can be doing some of this on your own. And you can also reach out to Andy and Reena and have your own sessions if you'd like. and find out what it is that's cursed you or created this problem, whether it be physical or emotional, mental, and get some real solid help from our lovely guests tonight. This has been
Definitely.
a great, great evening with you, and it's way too short. You're talking about
That it is.
Thank
That's
you so
it.
much
so
for
much.
having us. We
Thank
really
you.
appreciate
No,
it.
our delight.
Delight.
Yeah.
we
Thank
really
you.
appreciate you both staying up late from the UK for us.
Oh,
Bless
It's
your
been
hearts.
Yes,
yeah.
so
Thank you
thank you
so much.
so much. Yes, so again, we will be back next week with another great show. And until then, everybody, we will see you on the Blue Highway. Good night.
Good
Bye,
night.
everyone.